and they are not bothered about the actual geography. It seems to that when you look at the text. For example, there are different words. The geographical terms, just a mere listing, what I'm doing as the first part of my study is to try and list a glossary of terms used for geography. And some of the terms, I won't share the entire glossary with you, but for example, the mountains which are called giri, then there are parvatas. Parvatas have sharper tips, the giris are shorter and they may not have sharper tips. The parvata may be a kind of many headed mountain, and the sharpest peak of that parvata is called Parvata Kuta. That's a sharp peak of the Kuta. Then they immediately say, okay, because they are nice places and higher places, they should have palaces of gold and beryl and lotus pavilions where the gods, different gods. Now these gods are not the theological gods of the Hindus. Gods are also certain kinds of beings that occupy the universe. And these beings are blessed beings. They have more, they can live both in the upper worlds as well as come down for a visit to the Madhya Loka, because if the Tirthankara is preaching here, they would like to come and praise him. So they have sort of freedom of movement between these two worlds. They probably have a cosmic visa, which we don't have. We can't go to their country. So that's how we can see them. And so when they come, probably they stay in these palaces on top of the kutas and the parvatas. So there's a lot of description of how beautiful, and Jainas actually put in whatever they think is good and precious in the world, like gems and stones and polished beryl and diamonds and lotus ponds and fragrant spice airs and flowers, and so they add all these descriptions to these palaces. Okay, there's an interesting word which is called kshetra or varsha, which you often ignore. We say Bharat Varsh, right? The Varsha means continent or the landmass of Bharata. Bharata, according to Jaina thought, is the first son of Rishabha, sage Rishabha. So he is a very great Chakravartin. He was a great king. So we are named after him. I don't know if he has any relation to Shakuntala's son. In the Jaina thought, it is the son of a sage. The division of the continent, Varsha and sectors is very symmetrical. So with each geographical feature having its counterpart in the opposite direction. And it has to be proportionate. So again you have the idea of proportions. You have, like, if Bharata has one sector, then slowly every sector will have double, triple, squared. It will be like 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared. So they have this proportion. Different texts have different proportionate, but the middle is large. Remember, it's like a circle. So the bottommost part will be smaller. Then as it goes to the middle, it becomes thicker. Then as it goes to the top, it will again have less. So it's more like diamond shaped if you think of it spatially. The 7 continents on this island called Jambūdvīpa are Bharata, Haimavata, Hari, Vaideha, Ramyaka, Hiranyavanta and Airavata. These are the ones that are given in this particular text. There is a different list which has slight differences in another geographical text. Panika refers to that, but because I'm working with this particular text, I chose to use this. The interesting points of spatial geometry and numerical imagination. For instance, the continent of Bharat and Airavata have bow-like shapes. So they are sort of curved. They are bow-like shape. The bottom bow is Bharata and the top bow is Airavata. So if there is a mountain range that divides these two continents so the mountain range also will be bow-shaped if there's a wall. So the number of cities on the inner arc of that is lesser than the number of cities on the outer arc. So they're very particular. They say the cities on the mountains on the outer side is 60, which is more than the others on the inner side, which is 55. So very correctly they kind of calculate space and distance, and so you could fit 55 in the inner arc and 60 on the outer arc, and they're very technically, they say how much each city is, and if you actually calculate how much distance each city will take, how many yojana, you'll find it like exactly match. It's like a graph paper drawing of the universe. The mountains are not just geographical forms in the Jambūdvīpasam. They are also like a wall. They're like compound walls. I can almost think of them, compound walls, like coming from the idea of Jaina thought, because compound walls are mountains, and these mountains are called, they have a special name, they're called Vatadya, and the Vatadya mountains actually divide the continent. So between each region, like the north and the south, the Himalayas divide the continent between two continents. Okay, after the Himalayas, you have the next, not the Bharatavarsha, but another continent. But on this side, the Himalayas, below the Himalayas, parallel to the Himalayas, is a range of mountains which are called Vatadya, and the Vatadya divides into northern and southern half. And they say southern half is Arya, the northern half is Anarya. They also make a claim that they are barbarians living on the north, and the southern people are all the educated people who are willing to adopt the Jaina Dharma. Remember, here more than caste, it's more about violence. Okay, so Jains abhor violence; they don't like violence, and I've often thought that maybe that is what is Arya to them. The barbaric north is basically the violent north. The second point which I want to talk about is the mathematical ideas. The Jaina geographical imagination seems to be an exercise in mathematical imagination and the abstraction of the landscape rather than the landscape itself. It may contain some geographical information in some places, but one could almost call it a mathematical imagined geography. The description of the operations of numbers and the various calculations of area seems significant for the author than the actual landscape and climates, flora and fauna. The text is elaborate in its descriptions of numerical distances and sizes that claim this is the area of this region, the height of the peak. For example, the 6th and 7th sutra, the calculation of an area of a wall around Jambūdvīpa with a lattice and balcony, which is circular, is mathematically explained. They actually say the wall is this broad, it's thinner in the beginning. I'm not going to bore you with the numbers because it gets too technical. And then so it says it's broader at the bottom, then it has on top the wall is like this, then it has a lattice balcony of so many meters high, and then each lattice has got golden pavilions every few distances. So the commentator says to calculate the circumference of this wall, you have to use Aryabhatta's method. And this is Aryabhatta 1. So he acknowledges Aryabhatta here. He says the circumference of a circle is the square root of 10 times the square of the diameter. Its surface area is the circumference multiplied with a quarter of diameter. Not very different from a textbook in maths, which we often learn by rote and then answer an exam. This text seemed to suggest that the Jaina philosophers were not only very interested in naming and describing geography, but the logic of calculation had to underlie their explanations. After explaining, for example, they say, so how do you do, the geography that they describe is seen geography. So how do you describe an unseen geography, a non-pratyaksha pramana, if you may. So you use mathematics to give pramana. It is a very interesting thought. I've just had this thought when I was writing this paper. I intend to look at the Jaina pramanas and see if this unseen pramana, I think, is also a part of this whole pramana of the yogic vision that the Jainas have. And I think that is why they are choosing to mathematically explain what is not explainable in terms of, because astronomical calculations, and it reminds me of the fortune teller. So predictability would be definitely mathematical. It would be like, if this happens, this has to happen. So there are, for example, there are 11 peaks on Himavat and Shikarin, and the author derives 61 peaks should be there. He says there are 11 peaks and here and this, so totally there should be 61. How does he say? He says the number of each peaks in each of the 61 mountains is multiplied by the number of peaks on each. So he says if Himavan has 6 peaks, this one should also have 6, and this one. So they multiply and then they come up with one number. They just come up with a number 467 peaks. I mean, not 469, not 468. There's a very clear calculation leading to this many peaks. And the author is almost like, I'm telling you, it's 467. And I've done this calculation, and the calculation is proof of what I've done. So it's not like you cannot go and count up the peaks and say this is what happened. It's basically, I've done this calculation. So sometimes it sounds like the statistical reports on in quantitative analysis, where they say 4.2 children in Manipal go to English school. And because the numbers say it, it's almost like a number truth. And that's very interesting for me, that they use such a technique to talk about it. He doesn't say canonically it is said. The canon only supports. After he does the calculation, he says it's also said in this canon. That's what the commentator does. The last point in the cultural geography is about the importance of counterweights and proportional sizes. The idea of the various continents, I think, is made on a seesaw model. As if there's Bharata on this side, there should be a counterweight continent kind of supporting it on the other side, a symmetrical mirror image. So Bharatavarsha is described as the southernmost continent, separated by the rest of Jambūdvīpa with the Himalayas. And on the other side, you have Airavata, which is the one sector which is on the northernmost tip. Panikkar actually suggests that when they talk about the Meru, all of them say Meru is to the north, even for Airavata. So if a northern continent, Meru should be to the south. But if they are suggesting that the Meru is always to the north of all continents, we have to rethink our disk world. Was it actually a sphere? I don't know. They don't use the word sphere. They don't say Golaka. But they call it, they're all using circles. So is it like a different kind of an imagination where everything is to the north? Is north determined by Meru? So do they say the north pole shifts axis when you go to the north, then north becomes south, south becomes north? We don't know. But this is something which you can speculate on as to why they say the Meru is always to the north, though it's very clear that in Airavata, Meru should be to the south. Because
no, from your context, it is south to Airavata. From Airavata's context, it is north.
It is not.
They are correct.
They are correct. So that is what, that imagination of going on the other person's shoes and looking through from the other side, I think is an interesting thing. The speculation on the sphere is of course Panikka's own, and we don't know how much of that we can rely on. Further describing the mountains, the sutra claims that they are rooted in the surface of the earth. So they actually say
just to remember, we
10 minutes.
30. We have about 10 minutes. 12:34.
Yeah, I'll finish very fast. So the mountain descriptions, for example, in Sutra 27 and 28, read that Shikarin and Shula Mahimat, I think Shulla Mahimat, Mahahimavat, sorry, Shulla Mahahimavat, are 100 yojanas height and are made up of different materials, and they are actually rooted for 1/4 their size into the earth. So they're almost rooted. One can almost imagine them digging at the base of the mountain and finding diamonds and deciding the mountain is extending downwards. Or one can imagine that they are also again thinking of trees have roots, therefore everything else also must have roots and they have to be balanced. There has to be a foundation for the mountain. Only Mandara doesn't have a root, and we want to find out why. And I didn't get the answer in the text as yet, perhaps. Only Mandara doesn't have a root. Why doesn't Mandara have a root and other mountains do? Is there a story about it? So that's something interesting.
No, Airavata is a mountain.
Last is, so these are some of the geographical, cultural geographical points. Now I'm coming back to the second theme, which is about the liberation. This is highly speculative. So the place becomes central to Jaina thought because where you're located becomes a markers of one's nirvana possibilities. I'm inventing a new word, nirvana possibility. If you want nirvana, you need a possibility of things to happen for your nirvana. So this is the region where one may aspire for liberation for a higher birth, is one of the karma bhumis. So out of all these sectors and this, only 2.5 continents or 15 sectors are where human beings may actually do karma and shed their karma. In all other places, time is different, time doesn't progress, time is still, and there is no effort required. It's an effortless world. So they are called bhoga bhumis. So in one sense, these 2.5 continents or 15 sectors of human habitation is the only space where you can actually do karma, and you can get, and then this intersect this whole place-centric view by time-centric view. In Jaina, so what happens is once you get liberated, what happens? It's like an escape velocity. You lose your payload of your karma, you keep dropping down, and then you rise up, and the soul becomes, there's a natural inclination for the pure soul to rise upwards. They give examples of, let's say you take a coconut and wrap it around in mud and put it into the water. Because of the heaviness of the mud, it will sink down. As the mud keeps dissolving in the water, the coconut bobs up. So similarly like that, the soul keeps shedding its karma and goes up. And it goes up and it reaches the end of the universe, the topmost part of the universe, which is called Siddha Kshetra, which is a place. And this place is where the perfected souls do not have to be born, and they hang around there in perfected form. And this is a bounded universe. They are disembodied. They have perfect bliss that is unconditional, which is not dependent on sense pleasures. This place of course, Jambūdvīpasam doesn't describe this place, but in Tattvartha Sutra, in the Shvetambara commentary, which is supposed to be by Umaswati, that one, it actually says that it's in the form of a inverted white parasol. And its edges, it's thick in the center, and as it comes down to the edge, it becomes as thinner than a butterfly's wing. So it's like this sharp disc. And that's where the perfected soul.
Inverted umbrella, you can say.
It's an inverted umbrella. So basically, karma bhumis are conducive for liberation, and bhoga bhumis are not conducive for liberation. So moksha becomes place-centric. I'm coming to the end, almost to the end. So the Jaina realms are therefore ordered vertically based on a heavy and a light scale. Because karma is material, heavier karma would tend to drag the soul downwards, and the shedding of this karma would enable the soul to float upwards. So if you have really heavy karma, you could be dragged down to the naraka. And the lighter you are, the higher worlds you can actually occupy. Which kind of there's another thing that when I was reading Jaina philosophy, they say at any point of time you can get birth as any of the four four types of realms. Human gatis, four gatis. So you can either be a human or a microbial Tiryancha, or you could be a god. But given the idea that your karma is also dragging you, I don't know what the gati, how it is intersect between time, your spiritual aspiration, and the karma you have gathered. So there is a very, there's a kind of three-factor influence on where the karma is going to be born. It is not necessary that you could choose to coagulate your karmas and actually go down to Naraka and finish your work there and finish your karma expediation there. Like I hear the future Jina who's supposed, Tirthankara who's supposed to come, is actually in Naraka, actually giving up his karmas and doing penance so that he can come and be the Tirthankara in the next stage. If you see the Jaina soul, the Jina representation is usually like this in some of the things. It's an empty outline. The person has no name, no soul, so it's an empty soul. It basically doesn't have any body or matter, so it's a disembodied liberation. The interesting thing is people cannot shoot up above that because the souls don't go, because it's a bounded universe. There's no medium outside. So the boundary for where how much the souls can shoot up. Okay, this is already done. So another thing that influences your karma is the presence of a ford maker or a tirthankara. Basically, he bridges you, and the presence of tirthankara is very essential to liberation. And so in the other continents, which are not where we are, there are like our counter continent, which is Vaideha. A tirthankara is permanently teaching. And tirthankaras appear only during particular times of the Jaina eons. This is a description of the time. It's too detailed to go into right now, but we are in the descending cycle, and the stars indicate, the yellow stars indicate where you can get your moksha. So it almost seems like on the downward cycle, you have to kind of zoom through the wheel and then go up, like a Ferris wheel, you know. You can't get on the top, there is no need, because there's no karma, so it's very difficult for you to get. So suffering is essential for moksha. You have to have, the idea of suffering becomes essential, because that is something that gives, I want to explore a little more, because suffering is very important in Jaina karma, and that relates to the practices of pulling out the hair and giving yourself a little bit of suffering. So it's understandable, because dukkha is essential to karma. So the conditions for nirvana possibilities, or the rules for escape velocity, are the cycles, the right age, the sectors of human birth, being aware of your geographical location. So you wake up, you know you're in Vaideha, not in Jambūdvīpa. So in conclusion, one may always say that the precision involved in describing geography is to delineate the regions of karma bhumi with accuracy, to indicate places where liberation is possible, where one could find the true teachers of Jainism, the Tirthankara. In other words, where one is located in Jaina thought is to be articulated in detail to let one know what one has to do in advances. So you start thinking, okay, I must be born in Videha next because that's where the Tirthankara is teaching. By the way, sad news is all of us have to go to Videha or be born in the next 2-3 eons later for us to get liberation. The last Tirthankara is gone, and so we don't have Tirthankara. So all we can do is do good karma. So we'll be born in Videha, where the permanent Tirthankara is there, and then get liberated. And that too not in the other sector, that's Bhoga Bhumi. So you have to be born in the Karma Bhumi, half continent of Videha, the correct half to get liberation. So it's very difficult. So, so this is my first introduction to Jaina geography as a soteriological thing. So hopefully it will be successful.
We have actually no time for questions, so we'll still take a few questions, maybe 2 or 3 questions maximum. So, yeah, one question. Yeah,
No, you can take.
we'll take about, I think there are already 2 hands which have gone up, Michael and Keshav. So, yeah. Maybe we can take the questions together and then you can respond to them. That way it's, yeah.
Yeah, Meera, I mean, in the time that we are living where non-Western systems of thought are trying to make a space for themselves or trying to claim legitimacy against modern Western systems of thought, and they make the call being made that we take non-Western systems of thought seriously. Now, I want to know why should I take this Jaina system of geography seriously? I mean, that is all my question is.
I have a geographical question. There's Mount Meru in Java, north of Yogyakarta. Did the Jains go there, or does Jainism come from there? This is not a serious question. And then I would request you to translate in this wheel, in this time wheel. There was Sushma, Dushma, and then Dushma, and so on. What does this Dusha mean?
Okay.
Because my name is Dusha, I'm worried. You know?
Happy, plenty and privatation, as somebody would translate it, or happy sorrowness, marvelously sorrowful, sorrowfully marvelous. So usually stands for good and happy, and Du stands for bad and unpleasant. That's a quick question.
Yeah, one more question.
Yes. Just one supplement with the information that the cosmos and supracosmos, not only the living being, even the non-living being, Ajiva, you cannot find that in supracosmos level.
That's true.
So,
Bounded units, yeah.
Okay, my one last question is also, yes, yeah. Okay, I'll just ask my question and then you can ask yours. Yeah. So you said something about the construction, the landscape constructing the life, right? So is it there a possibility for the landscape? You talked about the landscape being constructed. Can the landscape then construct in the inverse? Is that possible? Because if you're talking about them prior to events, then there should be a possibility for that constructing an event. Is that possible?
So,
Oh yes.
I have one question to observation. Is that Meru mountain is an idea or a physical mountain somewhere? I always felt that it is an idea as the center of the world. Number 2, you have translated Bhumi as a place. I have some problem with that. You know, it is a Bhumi, Karma Bhumi and Bhoga Bhumi are the dimensions. They are not places. The Bhumi is used in, especially in Jaina language as dimensions, perspectives, not geographical places. And my third observation is this Jambūdvīpa and Videha, are they mutually exclusive?
Videha is a continent on Jambūdvīpa, Mahavideha.
But you told that you have to go from Jambūdvīpa to Mahavideha. That's
no, from Bharatavarsha to.
From Bharatavarsha.
From Bharatavarsha to Videha.
Achha.
Yeah. In Jammu, inside, we are all inside Jammu.
So is there any like geographical location for these two?
Yeah, that picture.
So no more questions. I think we really run out of time. We have very little time. So now
I'll
you can
handle the
answer
technical questions first.
Any other questions you can ask during lunch break. So.
Okay. First of all, yes, sir, Meru is an idea. It's not an idea only it also answers Michael's question. The Meru mountain is sort of the axis. All the lokas are tired along it. It's a common theme for almost all of Indian thought, including Brahminical. So it's an idea. There is, however, a Meru which people go in the Himalayas. It's called Sumeru, and a particular mountaineer who went there actually told me that he experienced Meru in Sumeru, but I don't know, that's a personal experience, so I can't vouch for that. About the idea of the supracosmos, yes sir, you're right, Ajiva also cannot exist beyond the supracosmos in the Aloka part. The idea that the Bhumi is a dimension, we can look into that, but for me place itself is not just geographical place. Place is an intersect of location and time. So the place study scholars nowadays don't refer to geographical places, they refer to place as event, what takes place, your memory, your construction. So place studies according to Casey and Ifutwa is both an interaction of the human with his environment. So place itself is now not a term that is limited to geography. Place in a larger context in cultural studies is now referring to a larger category. So in that sense I mean Bhumi as place. That's why I didn't say geographical space, I said place. So that's one thing. The other thing is that yes, landscape is prior. So therefore you will have people coming down. For example, they say the gods go to another continent to worship. The gods, we cannot go to that. They say, for example, there's this continent called Nandishwara, where the gods can go and worship these Tirthankaras. But we humans cannot go to that continent because it's out of our, we don't have visas to go there. So we construct our Tirthankara temples here, and these temples are but very light reflections of those temples that are in that. So we have imitation temples here. So that temples in the Jaina sacred places get constructed because of a geography of non-admission into that continent. So there is construction of geography. And yeah, okay, Keshav's question. So the point is that these texts are not going to answer any contemporary questions, but inasmuch you would study an old Greek text of Democritus or Aristotle, and then make it available for further modification. Because I think if Heidegger hadn't read the Greeks in the form that he could access them in German and he could deliberate on them, he wouldn't have made a breakthrough into whatever philosophy he did. And for us to look into this text is not it's more than a political agenda. I think it's a question of looking into different epistemes, looking at ways of imagination and thinking which are alternative, because sometimes what happens is we've kind of exhausted as much as possible whatever is there in the other systems, and perhaps it's also time for us to look into these sources and kind of not even say that they are great or they are the best, but at least to have a descriptive account. Even a descriptive account is not available, and then we can decide whether we want them or don't want them or want to progress. And I think these are all imaginations. For example, the idea of mathematics and all is quite interesting, and just to give them a place in history as much as you would give any other text. So I think that way it's important, and I believe that besides China thought, it's also important to look at African thought, Chinese thought, Japanese thought, maybe even the Adivasi thought. So I believe that if it is a system of knowledge, it needs acknowledgement as a system of knowledge. So not everyone can do everything, so I suppose some people have to get around to reading these texts. Yeah. Thanks.
Welcome back to the afternoon session. I invite Dr. Michael Duscher, faculty at MCPH, to chair the following session.
Now we have a very interesting session with two scholars from currently based in Innsbruck. The first is Professor Jayendra Soni, who retired in May 2012 from the Department of Indology and Tibetology from the Philipps University in Marburg in Germany, where he taught Indian languages, Sanskrit, Hindi and Gujarati. He studied in India, Banaras Hindu University, where he obtained his first PhD in 1978, and then to obtain a second PhD in 87 from the McMaster University from Canada. He presently lives in Austria and teaches part-time courses on Indian philosophies and religion at the University of Innsbruck. And he continues his research in Indian philosophy, including special studies in Jaina philosophy, on which he has also written several articles and books like Philosophical Anthropology in Shaiva Siddhanta from Motilal, Delhi, 1989, and he edited Jaina Studies Proceedings of the DOT, 2010 panel in Marburg in Germany, from Aditya Press in Delhi. Together with Michael Pahlke and Christoph Küppers, he has edited Buddhist and Jaina Studies Proceedings